James. Thank you for being with us today. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Meg.
Absolutely. So, before we get into all the goodness around organ meats, healthy foods, everything like that, I saw in your bio that you have history as a celebrity chef. So, I'd love to hear about your journey and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I got to work with a lot of amazing celebrities from Tom Cruise to George Clooney. I worked a little bit with Barbara Streisand and Gerard Butler. He was fun. But yeah, it was one of those things that I changed careers in my 30s, and I had always loved cooking as a kid, always, but I didn't see it as a job. And it wasn't until 9/11 that I suddenly was like, oh, I think I need to reevaluate my priorities and only focus on the things that have heart. And I cooking was one of those things. So I went to culinary school knowing that I did not want to work in a restaurant. I was very clear. I wanted to be a private chef. I was living in LA at the time. And I just knew that would be just, I just knew it would work for me. I don't know how I knew, but I just did. It's an interesting industry because private chefing at the time, there's like no guidance. Like you can go to school for cooking, or you can go to school for, being a doctor or nutrition or anything like that. But there was no guidance of like, okay, how do you actually be a private chef? What do you pay? What do you charge? What's the process of doing it? Like no one, there was no kind of blueprint. And I was fortunate enough to meet another private chef who kind of gave me some guidance, but it was kind of amazing. I just quickly built a really great resume. I think the school saw that I was really dedicated to cooking. I was a little older, so I didn't show up and just like some of the people going to culinary school had just gotten out of high school, and so they were kind of like they would not show up sometimes. They were like just living it up in New York, and I was like, I'm like here to learn, and I did everything. I was so responsible.
Wow. Do you see when you were a celebrity chef and you're working with these people individually, such a variation in diet? And how did you really find the niche of like creating kind of what they needed or specifics to? Because I know like when we're talking about food and working with people around food, everyone's diets are so different. So it probably shifted a lot with different people you're working with.
Yeah, I remember when I first started like the fat flush diet, which probably most people don't even remember. So I've been doing this for over 17 years, but the fat flush diet was like the hot book. And I kind of started to notice that whatever the newest hot book was, the trend diet, that's the one you needed to know. Because all the celebs, they're not different than us. They're kind of just, throwing darts at a board, hoping that, oh, well, maybe this diet will move the needle, or maybe this. So everyone's talking about this. So it it was interesting. And so I really took it upon myself to not only do those diets, but also to learn how to cook for them, because I had to understand them inside and out. So like the master cleanse, the one with like maple syrup and what is it, cayenne and lemon juice. Holy moly. I had to like, that was so popular back in the day, and I had to like really understand it. And so I would do it multiple times, and oh, it made me so sick. It's so not a good cleanse. I don't know. I just, ugh. But
Well, you're bringing up a good point because you're actually saying whatever is the fad is often what's done, and it's not always what's good for you. So it's like we can be
yeah.
doing, oh, a book comes out, it's popular, everyone wants to like jump on that. Feel sick. I think
Uh,
can, can you hear me? This has been the
is that better? Can you hear
Yeah,
me
I
better?
can hear you now. We got really, it just sapped. So I'm just going to cut it at after you said the fat flush, and I'll say you bring up a good point. Did it just get all bizarre for you too?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
So
don't know
yeah, if you
what's
just start
going
with that
on. I've
question.
never had this happen before, so I'm sorry. This is like crazy day, but we're we're making it work. Okay, so I'll just
Yeah,
start with the part where Dasan cut that, and we'll just start back at you bring up a good point. What yeah. So
yeah.
you bring up a good point because this is something I see all the time where there's a fad and everybody's jumping on that fad, and like you're saying, it wasn't actually making you feel good. It wasn't something that was actually good for your body, but we're all sort of doing that because that's what we hear. And that can often just start rolling and getting legs. So it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I always tell people like, you go to a practitioner and they'll tell you like what's going on. They'll tell you what you need to do and why. But then usually practitioners would call me in because I'm the how guy. So I'm very practical. I'm very like, look, this is, yeah, I get it that you can't eat these 20 foods, but I don't want you to feel deprived because I know that's not sustainable. So I'm going to show you how to do it so you don't feel deprived, because I'm very much about, and this is even how I created Pluck. I mean, it's to me, it's all about health has to be a lifestyle. It cannot be a fad. It cannot be a trend. Because if it is, then what's the point? You know what I mean? Like, why do we want to keep going, doing the whole rubber band thing, or the seesaw thing, where we lose weight for just a week and then we just gain twice that, the next 2 weeks, and just kind of yo-yo back and forth. It's just, that to me is not a quality life. So I'm always looking, I'll tell you this, I'm going to bottom line it. So in my 17 years, I've learned two things, and these are the simplest things, but they are truly hard to achieve. Okay. So to make health a lifestyle, you have to have two qualities. You have to make it easy, and you have to make it delicious. That's
Oh, I
kind of
like
it.
that.
That's
Yes.
kind of it. Like if
Yes.
you hit those 2 points, then health becomes a lifestyle. If you miss one of them, it becomes a trend or a hot topic.
I agree with you. And so I actually want to see, as a chef, to ask you a little bit about the second, because I do think easy. So I'm always trying to help my patients say, like, okay, let's make this as easy as we can. But sometimes when people have food restrictions, I try not to do a whole lot of restricting of food, but we have to sometimes based on
Yeah,
everybody's individual needs. They can feel very overwhelmed with how to do it and make it delicious. It feels like they're being maybe let's just use gluten as an example. So you're being
sure.
deprived of gluten, and you focus on how you're deprived, and we try to find easy ways. But do you have suggestions on how to switch it and really focus on making it delicious?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, and a lot of these are, there's tricks you can do in the kitchen, and then of course you have to do internal work, so they both coexist. So for example, one of the few questions I always ask clients when I first work with them is, I say, well, what kind of foods did you grow up with? Like, what were the textures? What did they make you feel? Right? Because if I can figure out what textures are your go-to foods when you have that really hard day, or when your feelings or emotions are really high, if I understand what your go-to comfort foods are and why, then I can make anything that you're being told not to eat. I can just find other foods and give them those same textures, and give them those flavors so that you feel comforted. So a good example, and I know this is now popular, but I was doing this long, long before it was popular, which is cauliflower, right? So
Yeah.
let's just say if you're someone who can't do the potatoes, but you love that mashed, creamy potato texture in your food because it's comforting. Well, then I could do the same thing with cauliflower. I could just make it a mashed parsnip, or a mashed cauliflower, or a mashed celiac root. Like, I can take some other vegetable that's kind of starchy or sort of resistant starchy, and I can give it that texture and that flavor that you associated with the thing that you're now told you can't eat.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so I don't often think of texture. So you're saying
Oh,
that the
texture is
texture.
everything. Texture
Okay.
is everything. Because think about it, like when you have, like, okay, let's just use ourselves, right? So when
Mhm.
you have a hard day, what food do you gravitate towards?
Hmm.
Before you knew too
Yeah.
much,
Yeah. No, you're
before you
right.
had all the knowledge you do now,
Yeah.
right?
I know. Well, okay, so so that's an interesting, like I grabbed caramel popcorn, let's say. So that would
Okay,
be a
so
crunchy and
salty,
salty.
crunchy,
Mm-hmm.
savory. Yep, yep.
Mm-hmm.
I
With a
was a
little bit of
chip.
sweet.
I was a chip salsa guy. Like, I just,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I love that crunchy, and then the kind of taste of the salsa sauce or whatever. I love that, but it's the crunch. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would do for you is, if you were like, okay, I can't do popcorn,
Mm-hmm.
is I would find something else that would provide that kind of crunch or that crispiness for you, and add maybe similar flavors. So I might make kale chips or something like that, or something that I could crisp up,
Mm-hmm.
that would be like that. I mean, even cauliflower you can kind of crisp up like that. Sometimes you can even take cabbage and do that. There's lots of things, whether pumpkin seeds. I mean, there's so many things you could do. But then I would add things like caramelized onions and things that were a little sweet to it
Okay.
to make
Mm-hmm.
it so that you were getting the sweetness, but without sugar.
Okay,
You know
yes.
what I
Yeah, because
mean?
we like kale chips. Kale chips are actually a big hit in my house. I have, because like you're saying, the potato chips, that's a good replacement. You get that crunchy taste with the salt. I put salt, but I never thought to put the sweetness into them too. So you're combining those flavors with the texture.
Exactly. And like, so for kale chips, that's a perfect example. Like I used to have a recipe. Well, I do have a recipe in one of the cookbooks I have out. But it's like you can take some like red onion, right? And just cut it small enough, chop it small enough. I don't mean small, I'm sorry, thin. So it can
Okay.
still be long, but just cut
Hmm.
it thin enough where it would kind of dehydrate or cook with the kale. And it just include that in the kale chip recipe, and it adds this natural sweetness and savoriness that's just so good, so good. So it's, yeah, there's little tricks, like you can even caramelize onions and add them to a dressing, and that's how you're getting your sweetness. Like I love using the vegetable or the produce and bringing out its natural flavors, whether it's sweetness or salt or whatever it is, the natural flavors to provide those textures and flavors that we're kind of synthetically getting. We're like using sugars or like all these kind of additives or these things to recreate those flavors, but I like to get them from the produce.
That's great. And what about like some of the things other people will say is the time? Like, okay, I want this, but some people feel like, oh, it takes time. So I'm always trying to think of simple ways for them to be able to get some of this in their life. Do you have any tips there about how to get something delicious, kind of create that in a way that's not feeling like, oh, I have to have these fancy recipes?
Yeah, so there's a couple of, I know there's lots of appliances out there that people are told they need, but you really don't need much. But the ones I would use that I think are time savers are a food processor. Like some people are chopping up their, I don't know, let's say their cauliflower when they're making roasted cauliflower. And I'm like, just throw it in the food processor. It chops up, or you can rice it really fast. I mean, there's so much you can do just really quick. A good blender, like when I'm making a roasted chicken, like basically what I do is I add some broth, I add onions, and that's kind of it. Maybe a little garlic, and then I slow cook, or I should say pressure cook or slow cook, either one. Like I use an Instant Pot. I cook
Mhm.
the chicken, and then I pull the chicken out and I put it on the broiler to roast, crisp up. And then I take all that onions that have been cooked and all that broth, and I just
Mhm.
blend it. And now I have a gravy, and it's a
Okay.
sweet and
Hmm.
tasty gravy. It's got the juices from the chicken, but it's also got the cooked onions, and it's just
Hmm.
so good. Add like, actually, I usually add pluck to that, and it's like
Okay.
amazing. And if you want, you usually can brighten things. Like I look at food as notes. So then
Hmm.
I would brighten that gravy with like a tiny bit of lemon juice. Like any acid is going to be a high note. So
Okay.
I always think of that. Like if you ever, that's another tip. Like if you ever are just finding the food that you're making is a little bland or just a little like, I don't know, not that interesting, not bright,
Hmm.
just use like a little lemon zest or even a tiny bit of lemon juice. And that should brighten it up. It should just make it kind of taste even better.
Great. Oh, that's a great tip. So, little things you can do it can make such a big difference.
Absolutely. I mean, a lot of people don't realize, like, that I find health really starts in the choices you're making in the kitchen. Like, for example, meal planning. Meal planning is something that we all talk about, but we all don't do. A lot of us
Hmm.
don't do,
Yes.
but it really does move the needle, and moves the needle on so many levels. So it moves the needle on when you go to the grocery store, you're not making emotional purchases because you're going off of a grocery list. That's really key, because so many of us make these impulsive buys in the
Hmm.
moment because we're hungry, or I don't know, we don't have the discipline of a list. But when you meal plan, you have a list. You just go off that list. The other thing is that it helps with decision fatigue.
Hmm.
We have these long days, we're all working hard. If you're a parent, you're also parenting hard. Like you're just like, you're always on. And so the last thing you want to do is have to make decisions at the last minute around dinner, because when you do, you're going to do random dinners and probably not as healthy. Maybe you're ordering out because your day went sideways. But if you've meal planned, you can actually meal plan around your day. So like a lot of times, if I know I'm going to have meetings all day, or I'm going to be super busy from like 9 all the way up to dinner time, I'll slow cook that day. So I'll,
Hmm.
in the morning, when we're getting ready for school, I'll put everything in the slow cooker, turn it on, and it's ready for me at 5. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So there's lots of things you can accommodate when you meal plan, but you have to use, the meal plan and your schedule. Don't just meal plan. Like really look at which days of the week of your schedule are going to most be supported by certain cooking methods.
I agree, especially like nights where maybe everybody's in and out and not eating at the same time. You just have that slow cooker on where it's like, okay, you can grab when it's I have high school kids, so they're all over the place. And so just like thinking through what does our week look like and what are we going to do this week can make a huge difference. And if we're going to eat healthy or if we're going to grab something out in the go because we didn't have time to do it.
Yeah, it really does help. I mean, and I would say, another thing, another mover in the kitchen is take control, take control over your the food you let into the kitchen. Because I really do, from my money, I equate what's in the kitchen by what's going to go in my body. So a lot of
Mhm.
people usually talk about, well, be really selective about what goes in your body. But I take it a step further. I'm like, no, 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 be really selective about what comes in your kitchen, because what's in your kitchen is what's going to go into your body.
Exactly.
Right. And so if you start from that point, you really can be more mindful about like, look, if this is something that you don't feel good when you eat, like if you're someone like who ice cream is a really big pull, I wouldn't bring it in.
Hmm.
And I would only use ice cream as something you do outside, because then you're going to limit how often you do it. It's going to be a bit more of a chore, to go get it. And it'll just be more of a treat than something that's just always in your kitchen, ready and available for the every moment that you want it. And I'm definitely the type person, like if I have it in the kitchen, if I see it, I will eat it. I don't, I have a really hard time controlling that.
Yeah,
And,
I'm the
you
same
know,
way.
yeah, and like so, and that's the thing too. It's like, well, you can either choose to pretend you don't know that, or we do know it. We can just own that intelligence and be like, okay, I know that I'm not good with things in my kitchen, so I'm not going to bring them in. And
Yes.
and it may hurt at first. It may be hard
I
that
know.
day, that one day you have a hard day and you're like, oh, I just wish that chocolate was here.
Yes.
But then eventually it won't hurt. You
Yeah,
just got to
because
give it a
it's so
moment.
hard when it's there. It's like if it's looking at if it's in your house and you want it, it takes a lot more willpower to avoid it once it's in your house than it does when you're grocery shopping to really make those choices.
Yeah. So these are like simple movements,
Hmm.
but I'm telling you, so many people just are not doing them. And I think it's because people don't realize how much they will move the needle if you just kind of follow them. It really can
Yes.
help.
Yeah, that's all great advice. Well, let's move into organ meats because I know that your
Mm.
company is surrounded, you created a great way to eat organ meats. So, what are organ meats and how did they show up in the world of cuisine?
Yeah, so organ meats, another name, of course, is offal, which is just such a
Yeah,
perfect name.
that's why I wanted to talk to you because I'm like, I know the benefits of organ meat. It's just hard getting it into your body.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they came. It's funny. They think the name offal came from when you butcher an animal. It's the parts of the animal that fall off. So they think that's where the name
Oh,
came from. But
okay.
it's an unfortunate name since so many people associate organ meats as tasting bad. But organ meats are basically defined as everything but the bone and the muscle. So that would include the things that we typically think about, like the liver, the kidney, the heart, spleen, ovaries, brain, all those things. But then, like, for example, sweetbreads is also organs. So those are the thymus and pancreas. Bone marrow is an organ, the stomach lining, which is also called tripe. Gizzards, the stomach lining in chicken are gizzards, the feet, the intestines. So these are all, when we talk nose to tail, we're talking really the whole animal except for the muscle and the bone. And it's really kind of Mother Nature's multivitamin. It is the most nutrient dense food on the planet, particularly the liver. It's just so incredible. And I look at society and I'm like, well, 93% of Americans are nutrient deficient, but we're not calorie deficient. That's for certain.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, we're an
Yes.
obese, overweight nation. So it's like, well, then what's going on? I mean, it really has to do with that it's not that we're not getting enough food, it's that we're making the wrong food choices. So I basically identified, okay, organ meat's most nutrient dense food on the planet. What are the three hurdles, or what are the hurdles of why we're not getting it? And I identified three main ones: the taste, the cooking of it, like knowing how to cook it, what to do with it, and then the sourcing. So I really set out to solve that problem. And I basically took the same ingredients that you're already finding in capsules. So freeze-dried powdered organ meats, they're raw, and then they freeze dry them and they powder them. So they're really as close to that natural state as possible. They're very nutrient dense still. And you're getting them from grass-fed, grass-finished cows. Most of it is sourced in New Zealand. So it's the same ingredient that you're going to find in the capsules. But then what I did was I combined it with organic spices and herbs to make it taste good. And so basically what pluck is it's a seasoning, like just like any other seasoning, but it's super powered because it's got organ meats in it. It's actually got 5 of them. It's got liver, heart, kidney, spleen, and pancreas. And by making organ meats taste great, now you're like, oh, I'll just sprinkle it on like I tell people, treat it like salt and pepper, literally sprinkle it on everything. And now everything is tasting more delicious. And it's now like you're getting all these micronutrients that you previously were not. And the more you use it, the more it accumulates in your body.
Yes. Yeah, that's great because it is. I know so vitamin A is one of the main nutrients of organ meats. I know that people with vitamin A deficiencies really should prioritize organ meats and sometimes find that hard to do. Can we dive a little bit more into the other health benefits of the organ meats?
Absolutely. So I'll even focus on the 5 that are in flux. So liver, as you
Mhm.
mentioned, high
Mhm.
source of vitamin A, which is also retinol. Vitamin A is shown to be important for like maintaining reproductive health, your eyesight, your immune system. It supports skin health. It's like it has liver has a multitude of bioavailable vitamins that combat numerous diseases, including heart disease and Alzheimer's. And so, and what I want to stress that word bioavailable, because that's something that we kind of hear every now and then, but it's really key because a lot of these fortified products out there that are fortified with vitamins and minerals, those are synthetic. And those actually, sometimes your body doesn't know what to do with them. It either can't absorb them or it overabsorbs them. Like it takes in too much. So you can enter this danger zone of getting too much of something. And that's because they are synthetic forms of these vitamins and minerals. But if you're getting it from a whole food source, your body actually knows what to do with it. And so we call that more bioavailable, meaning your body can actually like absorb it and take it in and or release it. It's just more connected. There's more interconnectedness with when it's coming from nature and you're a part of nature, right? So,
Absolutely.
so that's really, really key. Um, Most organs, including kidney, are really high in B12, which is a necessary, vitamin. You also have selenium and heme iron. We already said liver. Well, liver is high in iron as well, but heme iron is very absorbable iron. It also contains a nice balance of copper and zinc. That would be kidney. Um, you also have heart, which is coenzyme Q10, and it also has B12 as well. But coenzyme Q10 is like an anti-fatigue, anti-aging nutrient. So really, really important. It protects us against cardiovascular disease, infertility, and even mitochondrial dysfunction. So really, really key, right? Pancreas also has B12, but it's high in selenium. It helps to maintain proper thyroid function and promote metabolism. It's also got enzymes, natural enzymes in it. So lipase, for example, protease. So those are gonna, natural enzymes are gonna also help with our digestion as well. So really key. Spleen is high in iron, rich in vitamin C, vitamin B5, and it helps for proper thyroid. It helps with immune boosting. So, and then also it helps with getting, iron, carrying the iron it uses iron, sorry, to carry the oxygen from the lungs to various parts of our bodies as well. So these are like, really necessary, really important vitamins and minerals. And the organs are not only supplying them, but there's also this concept of like supports like. Have you heard of that before?
Yes.
Yeah. So the idea being, it's an ancestral concept, but the idea being that if I'm eating liver, the nutrients in that liver are helping my own liver. If I'm eating kidney, it's helping my own kidney. If I'm eating heart, it's helping my heart. So that idea of nose to tail, the fact that we're only eating muscle meat tells you right there where there's so much support that we're not utilizing. And so by putting these 5 organs in pluck, I'm just basically trying to make that nose to tail eating so easy. And then of course, delicious.
Yes, and that is key. And just so many of the nutrients that you're talking about are essential for thyroid health. So I know you mentioned thyroid, but if you're listening and you're someone who has thyroid issues or even suspects subclinical, we see so many people with this subclinical hypothyroid that aren't even diagnosed but are having trouble losing weight or losing hair, things like that, or feeling cold all the time. Just doing something like this, taking the organ meats and having all this combination of nutrients that are supporting your thyroid can be something that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. I'm personally, I love, so the other thing we don't talk about that much is, when we're taking supplements, there are water soluble supplements and then there's fat soluble
Hmm.
supplements. And when you're not eating certain supplements with food or fat, sometimes you can get like nauseous, right? So a lot of people don't realize that. And what I love about getting these nutrients and these nutrients from a whole food source is basically it is created the way it needs to be. So you're getting, if it's a B vitamin that needs to have like, fat soluble, needs fat to be soluble, it's in that form already. Like it's already
Hmm.
with the fat. It's already, the whole food was already built like that. If it needs other vitamins or minerals to complement, so that it makes it more absorbable, like the magnesium and the iron or something, like that, it's already there. It's in the whole food. Like Mother Nature made it so that it would be absorbable, so that it would be optimal. So I just love getting minerals and nutrients, and vitamins. I love getting them from whole food sources.
Yes, absolutely. And what do you find is the best sourcing for your organ meats?
Well, so New Zealand is kind of the premier sourcing, for a few reasons. One is because they are on an island, so they can kind of control their environment to a degree. They're able to feed the grass pretty much year round, like give them green grass year round. At least the farms we're getting it from, and and they also have access to every part of the animal. It's one of their major trades is their meat industry. Whereas in the US, a lot of the organs, it's not that they get wasted, but they're not for human consumption. So they get wasted from our nutrition. They don't get wasted in the supply chain. Like a lot of them go to pet food industry, some of them go to zoos, some of them get fed back to the animal, which is arguably not good. But yeah, so there's it's not that it gets wasted here, but it's just not, our industry is not set up for us as humans to use the organs, all of the organs, which is sad. And I hope to change that. I've had a bunch of meetings and I'm on, that's one of my, part of my mission is to help change the domestic supply chain. So not only do we get access to these things, but um, that we kind of help to support sustainably in getting like helping these small farms and helping them get access to everything and making it kind of increasing the supply chain so that we use these things for human health.
Hmm. Yeah, and that is so important. And I also have heard you talk about the lack of transparency, like in our food industry and in general, and like how that affects. I feel like the when we're looking at food, you're saying sourcing and having whole sources, but sometimes labeling can be so confusing because we see these labels, people don't understand what's on them. Do you have any advice surrounding that?
Yeah, I call it don't fall asleep in the cart. You know what I mean? So when you're grocery shopping, you really cannot assume that that item is what you think it is without just reading the back. And I say like you like even if it's something you've been buying for many years, because what happens a lot, and people don't know this, but let's say you have a favorite product and it's a small company. Well, if they get bought by a bigger company, they don't make a huge announcement. So you don't actually know that because they don't want to lose your customership just because, let's say, Nestle bought it or something like that. So they get bought, they still try to maintain the same look and feel of the product, but then that bigger company brings that product into their food supply. And so you start to see things like bars, like, I don't know, Epic Provisions was one that was bought by a big company. Like, you start to see that the ingredients in these things start to change from when it was, really quality based and transparent, and now becomes something else. Ben and Jerry's ice cream, that happened to them so many years ago when they got bought. So you just can't assume it's always the same product. So I always read the labels, and as simple as it may sound, like, if you read it and it doesn't make sense to you, then it's not going to make sense to your body,
Yeah, I agree.
you
I
know?
do. I say when you don't know what it is, you can't pronounce it. It looks like it's something you have no idea. Then it's probably not good for you. So you probably should put that one back because have you ever heard of like also the saying that sometimes we'll tell people more than five, like look for things with less than five ingredients
Yeah,
sometimes too, because they're more, if you know what the ingredients are and there's less ingredients in there, then it's more natural things that start to.
absolutely. And I always emphasize, like, purchase food that is an ingredient versus that has ingredients.
Oh, I like that.
You know what I'm saying? So, like when I buy produce, that is an ingredient. When I buy, single ingredient items, those are going to be things I'm adding to something else versus, this all-in-one packaging that, or product that is already made for me, and all I have to do is heat it up or something. When you have to do that, then you pretty much can guarantee it's going to have stuff, because you got to remember, I mean, it's not that they're out to get us or something like that. I mean, I don't believe in that kind of, I don't think there's so much evil in the world, and these big ag companies are against us. I think they're just trying to make a profit. You know what I mean? And the
Mhm.
reality is that they need to make a profit. They need to have a shelf life, and they also have to have ingredients that are affordable. And two of the cheapest ingredients are salt and sugar. So that's why so many processed packaged goods have lots of salt or lots of some kind of sweetener. And that they pump these things full of these items so that it's cheaper, and then that way they can make more money. I mean, it's that simple, but it has to have a shelf life. I mean, if perishable goods, they don't they won't last long in the grocery store, and then those companies won't last. So it's all about shelf life.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. You've provided so much information. So let's talk just a little bit about pluck again and, just tips. So it's all source organ meat. You can get that, right? Sprinkle it on all of your foods, get it into your diet in a healthy, good way.
Yeah, it's really, the goal is how can we make those organ meats happen, regularly in your diet. So with pluck, it is a seasoning that has organ meats in it, but you can use it daily. Like, you can put it on everything. A lot of people, I get feedback like, oh, I put it on my eggs. I'm like, and like, put it on
Yeah.
more than just your eggs. Cause like my kids put it on popcorn, they put it on
Okay.
their toast. I mean, I put it on salad. Like, I put it on everything. And then you're getting those micronutrients regularly, frequently, and that's cumulative effect. And it really is, like, even when you have those days that go sideways, like we were talking about earlier, and let's say you ordered pizza for the family and you're like, as a parent, you're feeling kind of bummed, but I just sprinkle pluck on it. And I'm like, great, at least I got the organ meats into my kids' diets today. And I feel a little bit better. So
Yeah,
it's just,
yeah,
it's just,
easy ways. If you can
just
find easy ways to get it in that isn't like you don't have to think about it. You just have it there. You can put it on and add some nutrients. That's great.
exactly. And what's nice about it is, so organ meats have an umami flavor. And if for those that don't know about flavoring, we have four that we talk about a lot. So that's this salty, sweet, sour, bitter flavors in our mouth.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
Well, there's a fifth one that was discovered in Japan in, I think, the 80s. But it's basically called umami, and you can describe that as savory. That's kind of the best way. But there's lots of things in the world that have umami, like soy sauce is umami, mushrooms are umami, tomatoes even have some umami, and meat has some umami, and organ meat has umami. So umami is really amazing because what it does is it makes the other four flavors taste better. So it actually brightens those flavors, and it triggers the part in your brain, that addictive part that wants to eat more of that food. So how this shows up in packaged foods is it shows up as MSG. So MSG is umami for packaged foods, and it triggers that part in your brain of like, oh, I want more. I want to eat more of this. So what's kind of cool is that pluck naturally has umami. It just, that's part of being, the organ meat. And so we see this response in people. We see like kids who try pluck, they don't want to stop because the flavor, it tastes so good. But I also think it's because their bodies need the micronutrients. They're missing those micronutrients, kind of similar to when you taste salt on your tongue. Your
Mhm.
body immediately communicates that either it wants more or it doesn't. I
Mhm.
find the same thing happens with pluck, is that I haven't met a kid yet that doesn't like it. So what happens is these kids just want to keep eating it. So that's a sign that their body is needing these micronutrients. I find that in adults as well. But then also it just makes the food taste better. So many families are telling me, they're like, all I did differently for dinner tonight was I put pluck on the meal, and my family wanted seconds. They kept saying, oh my gosh, this meal is so good. And I'm like, yeah, that's the umami.
That's great. I like that umami, and then we want good things with umami, not MSG, right?
Right,
So
right.
that is
Yeah.
not yes. Well, thank you so much for being here. And can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah. So Eat Pluck is our website, and you can find us on social media as well, pretty much most of them, at Eat Pluck. And I'm personally at Chef James Berry. And let us know if you get some or you order any. Please reach out to us and let us know how you're using it. Tag us, everything, because we love getting that feedback. Because we're a newer company and we're still growing, and so we need that support to educate people on not only organ meats but also just to show them like this is how good organ meats can taste. Like I feel in many ways like with pluck we've cracked the code on organ meats. Like they don't taste icky anymore. You know what I mean? When you use it with pluck, it doesn't taste icky. It's like it's delicious. So if we can just spread that word more, I think more people will get them in their diet, and then hopefully they'll feel better because they're healthier.
Well, yeah, and we'll link that in the show notes, and everyone listening can have a 10% off coupon if you use the code MEGMILL. We'll link that in the show notes so that you have a chance to try Pluck. And I actually just got my first package yesterday, and I can't wait I have it on my shelf to use for my dinner tonight too. So I will post and share and let all of you know and let you know, James. I'm sure I will love it. So thank you again so much for being here and have a great day.
Thank you.